final topic for today. I want to talk about the military. Recent kind of, I use the word betrays the President of the United States, President Trump. And, we didn't talk about this in this show very much. We made brief allusion to this, but you recall right after the protests in Washington and including in this, and I don't even want to say protests, the rioters, looters, arsonists, thugs who've been ripping apart American cities for the last 10 days in Washington, D.C., one thing they did was attack a church, St. John's Episcopal, very near the White House. It's a historic church. It's lovely. President Trump decided to make a statement by going across the street from the White House over to that church and standing in front of the church, as you can see in the background, damaged by the rioters and looters, and just to stand there with an array of other leaders of our country to say, essentially, we, the government, the president, we stand with this church. We stand with the people of America. We stand for the protection of private property. We stand for the protection of churches. And therefore, he's saying, this is not okay in America to have rioters destroying a church. Not okay. So he did it was not a long service or a ceremony. It was just a standing there. And it was a symbolic gesture. I found it to be actually very, very profound, very moving, very appropriate. Of course, leftists quickly said, oh, it's a photo opportunity, a photo op, just to, who's he to get out? Like, he's not allowed to leave the White House unless the left says it's okay. So they mocked him for doing that. And they also, the left, engaged in a relentless misrepresentation or just straight out lies about how the president's safety was secured from walking from the White House over to the church. Because in order to make a safe passage for the president, other leaders of our country, from the White House to the church, there were rioters throwing things. You had statements from the Park Police saying there were rioters throwing projectiles, which usually means glass bottles, things that can hurt someone or even kill someone. And so the people whose job it is to protect the president were pushing the people back. There was first claims that they were attacked in some way, that rubber bullets were fired, that there was and claims by these rioters that they somehow had the right to continue to throw projectiles toward the president and his entourage, continue to attack, and anyone who dared stop them was interfering with their First Amendment rights. A lot of confusion in America today, by the way, on the left about what your First Amendment right is. You definitely have the right to peaceably assemble. You have the right to protest. You don't have the right to take over, as they have done in Seattle, take over an area of land, and you don't have the right in this country. Your First Amendment right to protest does not include the right to throw objects at other people, to engage in violence. It does not include the right to burn down buildings, burn cars, smash windows, steal things. None of that's protected by the First Amendment. And President Trump was out there saying, in the middle of was almost a war-torn looking Washington, we're not going to allow this. That was the symbolism of him standing there with the Bible in front of this church. So when I say the military is betraying President Trump, I'll start with the Joint Chiefs Chairman, General Mark Milley. I don't have his picture, but General Mark Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said on Thursday of last week he regretted participating in the photo opportunity. Now, this is a leftist site calling it a photo opportunity, but he regretted participating in that picture with President Trump at the historic church near the White House that was damaged during protests. He said, I should not have been there. He said it in a pre-recorded message to the graduates of the National Defense University. My presence in that moment and in that environment created a perception of the military involvement in domestic politics. So he's trying to give a kind of a, the only reason I'm apologizing is because this is about politics and that's not our job. The military stays neutral in politics. That would be true if what we're watching was simply a domestic uprising. We are watching an attack on America. We are watching Marxist-funded organizations, radical left organizations, Soros-funded anti-American organizations placing our country under attack. So his kind of nuancing, parsing why it really wasn't okay is ridiculous. Second, even if that's actually his legal conclusion or his, what his heart tells him, his logical conclusion, his job as the current chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff is to privately say to President Trump, you know what? I don't feel great about having done that. It probably wasn't my job. So next time I probably shouldn't participate in that kind of photo op. That's what you do when you understand that, number one, America is under threat, and number two, we actually have a chain of command, and President Trump is the commander-in-chief. You do not go out and publicly humiliate the president, especially when you recognize the astonishing attack our country is under from the radical left. This is not Democrats versus Republicans. This is, you have America and you have people trying to destroy America, destroy our cities, destroy property with impunity, take over areas of our country, throw objects at the President of the United States, and you think this is a political dispute and I better stay out of it. But even if that's what he thought, his only recourse, if he were to be behaving like a respectable member of the military, understand his duty to support the commander-in-chief, would have been a private conversation. So he also, additionally, we had challenges. So that was Mark Milley. General Mark Milley said that he's a chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. There were also, President Trump had this past week made comments about the fact that he is not going to rename Army installations that are currently named after Confederate leaders. This is another push consistent with the left of tearing down statues, tearing down monuments, desecrating monuments, even, as you saw at the start of the show, to somebody who was standing up against slavery. Get that, the Black Lives Matter people are desecrating a statue of a guy who was standing up against slavery 30 years before the Civil War. There's no logic there at all. What these people are doing is talking about the destruction of America. So President Trump, unwilling to give them an inch, and he's right, in my opinion, to say that, said, we're not renaming any of our military installations even though they are named after Confederate officers. So we had former Defense Secretary James Mattis criticized President Trump, openly criticized him, denounced the abuse of executive authority. This is, again, back to the Lafayette Square. This is the president walking from the White House to the church. General Mattis weighs in. Former Defense Secretary Mattis weighs in, saying he denounces the abuse of executive authority of forcing protesters out of Lafayette Square. Like, the president isn't allowed to go where he wants, the protesters get to go where they want, and the president is supposed to sit around and act helpless. So again, Mattis, clearly shown himself to be, he's lost his gravitas that he ever had. I guess he really was a great military guy. Can't take away his military history, but he's become part of the radical left's attack on Trump. He's become part of the people who love the headlines, love the attention of being quoted, in some way denigrating the President of the United States. So here's what Mattis wrote, and we must reject any thinking of our cities as a battle space that our uniformed military is called on to dominate. We should use, and he goes on, militarizing our response should only be done by state governors. He sets up a false conflict between the military and civilian society. The military is on the side of the United States. When you have peaceful protesters in Washington who are holding signs, whatever those signs say, that's peaceful protest. When you have destruction of property, taking over of geographic areas of the country, violence, destruction of property, at some point, it is perfectly appropriate. This is Mattis attacking Trump for saying that we may have to call in the military under the Insurrection Act if the state governments cannot get their act together and contain and control the protests in their country. Mark Esper, Secretary of Defense, also weighed in, taking a public attack against President Trump. It's one thing, as I say, it's one thing, these people, because they've taken positions of authority, does not mean they've lost the right to think. It doesn't mean they've lost the right to have an opinion that is inconsistent with the president's opinion. They, however, are part of our chain of command. They are part of our structure. And for them to weigh in the public eye to attack the president, this is, I guess I can't say it's treason. I'm not going to go that far, but there are people who are saying you don't get to serve in these positions with authority in this administration and enjoy the public limelight of attacking the president, which seems to be what Esper has done. So we have, and I want to point out something important about this. This is in one of the articles linked on our website, americacanwetalk.org. This point is made in there. Under the previous presidency, under Obama for 8 years, many people documented, you had in the Obama era the cleansing of leadership level in our military, the removal of people who had a strong pro-America stance and the right of defending America and protecting America. A strong America was completely inconsistent with what President Obama was all about for 8 years. He was about weakening America. The military suffered under the Obama era, not just because he kept cutting funding and not providing sufficient supplies, weaponry, ammunition, everything else the military needs, because the very culture of the military, denigrated by President Obama, the removal of people who were in the high positions in the military who were inconsistent with Obama's let's weaken the military plan. And so you have people now in leadership who's in the military who somehow survived 8 years of Obama's removal of strong pro-America people from the military. Think about that. Think about that. People who criticized Obama concerning the time he was negotiating with Iran to give them nuclear weapons. The whole Iranian deal was not to protect the world from the possibility of the Iranians developing nuclear weapons. It was to enable the Iranians to develop nuclear weapons. The entire purpose of the deal, military leaders pointing this out, military leaders questioned, and they had to leave the military. This is where we are in this country. We have a military, sadly, too many people at the highest levels survived there because they aren't the strong pro-military people we needed. So one article I urge you to read at our website, Mark Milley and Mark Esper, The Rising Costs of Barack Obama. You got to read this up, understand. So you now have the people who love the attention of the Beltway Approval Club of military. You got Colin Powell, David Petraeus, John Kelly, H.R. McMaster, James Mattis. They are all showing America how dang cool they are by criticizing the president openly, mocking his efforts to protect America. There's a brilliant piece on our website also called The Military Intelligence Complex by the just extraordinary writer Victor Davis Hanson. Another piece full of examples and explanation for how we have diminished our military and our intelligence, the connection between it, because we have people soft and understanding the idea of America. But I want to do one last thing before I go to telling you why the stories we talked about today matter to you. If you think all of this is just rah-rahing for President Trump and criticizing anybody who says anything about him, I think Trump deserves criticism on some points. I don't agree with everything he says and does. But when you're in the military and even you're ex-military and your job was to defend this country and you swore allegiance to the Constitution, which has only one commander-in-chief, and you've got your commander-in-chief and you don't like what he does, your job is shut up. That's your job. You don't have to vote for him next time. You don't have to get out there and praise him. But to be critical of this commander-in-chief at the time we're practically at civil war in our country is unconscionable. Now I want to show you, if you think it doesn't matter what these goofballs are saying, I have Matt the Wonderful. I sent him a clip of Joe Biden, how he is reading what Trump has been, what the criticism of Trump. Let me start before we play that clip to say, Joe Biden, was allowed out of the basement briefly this week. I mean, he never leaves the basement. They're trying to keep him, out of the public eye because he can't speak English well, because he is sadly suffering from some form of dementia and cannot put two sentences together. But they let him out, and then he did some interviews. One interview he talked about the idea. He is trying to instill fear in the hearts of American people, saying, I'm afraid, I don't know, I'm afraid that, in the fall when Trump loses, or if he loses, he'll refuse to accept the results of the election. He may refuse to leave the White House. We may have to have the military go in to drag him out of the White House. That's what may happen. This is the idiocy spewing from Biden. But let me ask Matt the Wonderful at the end of the show today to play this little clip.
It's my greatest concern, my single greatest concern. This president's going to try to steal this election. And I was so damn proud. Here you have 4 chiefs of staff coming out and ripping the skin off of Trump. And you have so many rank and file military personnel saying, whoa, we're not a military state. This is not who we are. I promise you, I'm absolutely convinced they will escort him from the White House with great dispatch.
Okay, people. we're probably going to have to do a show sometime soon to talk about all of the various facets of insanity spewing from Biden's mouth in just that little clip. President Trump has never said, and he is not going to refuse to leave the White House if he loses the election November 2020. I think Trump is going to win by a landslide. I think the American people can finally see how completely crazed America's Democrat Party is, and they're watching waiting for some Democrat to be the grown-up in the room and take charge of our cities again, and they can't see anyone stepping up. But if it were to happen that President Trump lost the election in November 2020, he is not going to stay in the White House. He is not going to have to be dragged up by the military. And not only do I know that, I think you know that. I think Biden knows that. But Biden is thinking, he's convincing people, he's trying to scare people about who President Trump is. And when you heard that language, the way he's characterizing the people attacking President Trump, he uses the language that these people are tearing the skin off the president. You see what Biden is trying to say is that you see how deeply harmful and just a vicious attack it is on the president for these people of former political consequence, former military consequence, weighing in, attacking him publicly. It is playing to Biden's favor. These people, whether they're still serving or they're done serving, they can vote for anyone they want, but they are grotesquely interfering with President Trump's role as commander-in-chief. They're grotesquely interfering with his governance of this country at the time we're literally under attack from a Marxist element in this country. And when you hear how Biden characterized it, you understand it's powerful when they do that. Biden and other people who still think Biden has any clarity left to him, those people listening to Biden go, oh my gosh, that's right. Those people said those things. And so maybe it's really true. And maybe President Trump is just going to refuse to leave the White House. I mean, it's pure absurdity. But this is, I think, so this is what Biden is doing with it. This shows the harm and the true, just malicious nature of the comments by all those people in the military who had roles in the administration or roles in the military going after attacking President Trump. I know there are some people floating the idea whether those people could actually be at least investigated, possibly court-martialed. I don't think so. I don't know. I think that'd be pretty extreme. But I think that people in the military in our country used to understand if you're serving an administration and you're in office of the administration, you do not run out and mock, ridicule, and denigrate a president, especially at the president you work for, especially at the time when we're under such a direct attack from Marxist forces in this country.